The sound of the slap echoed across the weapons qualification range like a gunshot. 83 pairs of eyes turned toward the small woman who had just hit the concrete. Her cheek burned red. The handprint was already forming. Her technician's cap tumbled away, rolling to a stop against an ammunition crate. Staff Sergeant Declan Kane stood over her. 6'2", 200 pounds of muscle and ego wrapped in an Army Ranger instructor's uniform. The morning sun caught the combat patch on his shoulder, the one he wore like a medal despite never having earned it in actual combat. His shadow fell across the woman at his feet like a judgment. "I asked you one last time." His voice carried across the training yard. "Designed to humiliate. Designed to break. Give me the weapon." Kira Thorne, maintenance technician, oil-stained uniform, dark auburn hair, pulled back in a tight bun, slowly pushed herself up from the ground. She said nothing. Just quietly picked up her cap, dusted it off with deliberate care and placed it back on her head. Her movements were measured, controlled, carrying a precision that seemed almost mechanical. "Can't talk," Declan laughed, turning to the crowd of Rangers watching the scene unfold. "See this? This is why women don't belong here. Can't even inspect a rifle properly without causing problems." Laughter rippled through the training yard, not the full-throated kind, the nervous laughter of young men desperate to belong, desperate to prove themselves by joining in the humiliation of someone smaller, someone who couldn't fight back, or so they thought. Kira remained silent, but something in her eyes made Master Sergeant Boone Mallory, standing in the far corner, pause mid-step. He narrowed his gaze, studying the way she stood, shoulders open, center of gravity low, hands relaxed at her sides but ready. That stance, he'd seen it before, in places where even Rangers weren't cleared to set foot. Colonel Nathaniel Voss emerged from the command building, conducting his routine inspection. He stopped when he saw the scene before him, his weathered face marked by 64 years of service, and secrets revealed nothing. But his eyes locked onto Kira with an intensity that spoke of recognition. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through the morning air with the authority of a man who'd commanded operations the world would never know about. Declan spun around, his face still flushed with anger and something else, something darker. "Sir, this technician is refusing to release weapons to my unit. She's delaying our entire training schedule." Voss looked at Kira, then at the M4 carbine in her hands. For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Knowledge, understanding. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the neutral expression of a commanding officer dealing with a routine matter. "Handle it, Staff Sergeant." Declan grinned. The expression was predatory. "Yes, sir." He stepped toward Kira, fists clenched. But in the next 20 minutes, everything he believed about himself would crumble to dust. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The Joint Tactical Training Complex buzzed with controlled chaos. Over 80 personnel from Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and various support units had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine qualification day. The humidity hung thick in the air, mixing with gun oil and testosterone, creating an atmosphere that was part gymnasium, part proving ground. Kira Thorne had been working at this weapons station for 4 years. 4 years of invisibility. 4 years of being overlooked, dismissed, treated as furniture that occasionally moved and spoke. But it hadn't always been like this. The first year had been different. When she'd arrived in 2021, fresh from medical discharge, still carrying the weight of Raqqa in her eyes and lungs, most people had simply ignored her. She was new. She was quiet. She did her job with an efficiency that bordered on unnatural, but that was fine. The military appreciated efficiency. The second year, the comments started. Small at first. Caleb Morrison questioning her weapons assessments. Veronica Ashford making snide remarks about overqualified janitors. Declan Kane watching her with an intensity that felt less like curiosity and more like predation. Year 3 brought physical intimidation. Declan standing too close, invading her personal space, using his size to make her feel small. Chase Preston accidentally bumping into her. Tools going missing from her station. Work orders mysteriously delayed. Year 4 was when it escalated. Verbal abuse became routine. Public humiliation became sport. And Declan's obsession with proving her incompetent became his mission. But through it all, Kira had remained silent, patient, waiting, because she knew something they didn't. She'd survived worse than anything Declan Kane could imagine. And when the time came, she would show them exactly what 4 years of restraint looked like when it finally broke. She returned to her workstation without a word. Her movements remained measured and deliberate as she continued inspecting the rack of M4 carbines awaiting distribution. Her fingers moved across each weapon with a precision that seemed almost supernatural, checking chambers, testing trigger assemblies, examining firing pins under the harsh fluorescent lights of the armory alcove. Each inspection took exactly 47 seconds. Not 46, not 48, exactly 47 seconds per weapon. Boone Mallory watched from his position near the range control tower. At 72 years old, he'd seen more combat than most men would see in 3 lifetimes. Desert Storm. The first Gulf War in 1991, where he'd embedded with SEAL reconnaissance teams hunting Scud missiles in the Kuwaiti desert. 2 advisory tours in Afghanistan during the early years after 9/11. He knew what trained operators looked like, the way they moved, the economy of motion that came from thousands of hours of drilling, the situational awareness that became second nature. And Kira Thorne moved like one. He'd noticed it 2 years ago. The way she cleared corners when walking through doorways even in a safe environment. The way her eyes constantly scanned tracking movement, assessing threats that didn't exist. The way she positioned herself in rooms to maintain sight lines to all entrances. Those weren't habits you picked up maintaining weapons. Those were survival instincts drilled into you in places where inattention meant death. He'd kept his observations to himself. If she was hiding, she had her reasons. And Boone Mallory had learned long ago that some secrets were meant to stay buried. But watching Declan Kane circle her like a predator, Boone felt something shift. A sense that whatever Kira had been hiding for 4 years was about to be exposed whether she wanted it or not. 20 minutes behind schedule because some grease monkey thinks she knows weapons better than soldiers who actually use them. Declan's voice pitched to carry across the yard. Sergeant First Class Veronica Ashford materialized at his elbow. The admin NCO had a face that seemed permanently set in disapproval. Her eyes tracked Kira with the kind of disdain usually reserved for something stuck to the bottom of a boot. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her features into a permanent scowl. "I've been trying to get her transferred for weeks," Veronica said, her voice carrying satisfaction. "She doesn't follow protocol, questions everything, acts like she's better than everyone else. She needs to learn her place." Declan's tone mixed contempt with something uglier. From the Armorer Station Specialist Caleb Morrison joined the conversation. His voice carried a whine of wounded pride. At 32, he'd been doing this job for 6 years and considered himself an expert. "She flagged 3 of my weapons this morning, said the firing pins showed irregular wear patterns. I've been doing this job for 6 years. 6 years, and some cleaning lady thinks she can tell me my business." Private First Class Chase Preston, barely 22, and desperate to prove himself, laughed too loudly. The kind of nervous laughter that comes from wanting to belong more than wanting to be decent. "Maybe she's got a thing for guns since she can't get a man to look at her." The comment drew scattered chuckles from the younger trainees. None of them noticed the way Boone Mallory's jaw tightened. None of them noticed the way Faye Donovan, the supply NCO watching from the depot doorway, shook her head in disgust. Kira didn't react. She simply held up the M4 that had started the confrontation, her hands steady as she worked the charging handle. The weapon's bolt carrier group slid free with a whisper of metal on metal. She held the firing pin up to the light. Sunlight caught the component, illuminating imperfections invisible to untrained eyes. "This pin has asymmetric wear on the tip." Her voice was quiet, almost clinical. The voice of someone stating facts, not seeking argument. "Approximately 0.3 millimeters of deviation. Under sustained fire, it will fracture within 100 rounds. Possibly fewer." Caleb's face reddened. "That's within acceptable tolerances." "Acceptable for a training weapon that won't see combat." Kira set the pin down with careful precision. The movement somehow final. "Your Rangers are deploying to the Syrian border in 6 weeks. Staff Sergeant Ryan Kane mentioned it himself this morning. This weapon will fail them when they need it most." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Suddenly, the casual cruelty felt less like entertainment and more like watching a professional dismantle an amateur. Not through aggression, but through pure competence. Declan stepped forward, his boots heavy on the concrete, each step designed to intimidate through sheer physical presence. "How do you know about our deployment?" Kira's expression didn't change. Her dark eyes met his without flinching, without showing anything at all. "You announced it to 30 trainees at 07:15 this morning. Sound carries." Declan turned to his audience again, playing to the crowd. "Listen to this. The cleaning lady has opinions about combat deployments." Captain Hugo Barrett appeared from the administrative building, drawn by the commotion. The training officer had the look of a man who valued smooth operations above all else. His uniform pressed to knife-edge creases, his expression professionally neutral. The kind of officer who had spent more time behind a desk than in the field, who compensated for lack of combat experience by maintaining absolute control over his domain. "What's the holdup?" Declan straightened, sensing an opportunity for validation. "Sir, this technician is refusing to release properly inspected weapons. She's overstepping her authority." Barrett's gaze swept over Kira, dismissing her in a single glance. The look of a man who'd already categorized her, filed her away in a mental drawer labeled support staff, and moved on. "You're here to maintain and distribute equipment as directed. Do your job and let the professionals handle the rest." "Yes, sir." Kira's response was automatic, her face betraying nothing. But Faye Donovan, who had been watching from the supply depot doorway, caught something in the set of Kira's shoulders. A tension that didn't match her submissive words. A coiled readiness that spoke of training far beyond maintenance procedures. Faye had been in the Army for 15 years, long enough to recognize the difference between someone who was beaten and someone who was choosing not to fight. She'd seen it before in soldiers who'd come back from places they couldn't talk about, doing jobs they'd never acknowledge. The way they moved, the way they watched, the way they existed in spaces as if always calculating angles and exits. She approached Kira as the confrontation temporarily dispersed, the crowd moving toward the shooting lanes for the morning's first qualification round. "Hey, you okay?" Kira looked up. For just a moment, something human flickered behind her guarded expression. Recognition of kindness in a place that had offered precious little. "I'm fine, Faye. Thank you for asking." "You should report him. That was assault, clear as day. He's got connections." Kira resumed her inspection of the weapon rack, her movements never faltering. "Friends in high places. I've seen his type before. They always have protection." Faye studied her colleague's profile, noting the faint scar that traced along her jawline. The kind of scar that didn't come from kitchen accidents or automotive mishaps. The kind that came from violence survived. She noted the calluses on Kira's hands, too thick for someone who just cleaned weapons. The kind that came from thousands of hours gripping pistol grips and rifle stocks. The way Kira's eyes constantly scanned the environment even while her hands worked, tracking movement, assessing threats, maintaining awareness that went far beyond what a maintenance technician needed. "Where did you serve before this?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Kira was quiet for a beat too long. "I'm just a technician, started 4 years ago, nothing special." But Faye had been a supply NCO long enough to read people, to spot the things they tried to hide. And everything about Kira Thorne screamed that nothing special was the biggest lie she'd ever heard. The morning progressed with grinding efficiency. Trainees cycled through the qualification lanes in groups of 8, their rifle reports creating a staccato rhythm that echoed off the concrete barriers. Declan prowled the firing line like a predator, his voice a constant bark of criticism and condescension, finding fault, demanding perfection, using his authority like a blunt instrument. Kira worked in the background, invisible to most, essential to all. She cleared jammed weapons, replaced worn components, ensured that every trainee who stepped up to the line had a functioning rifle in their hands. Her movements were efficient, almost choreographed, each motion flowing into the next with a precision that seemed unconscious. The product of repetition burned so deep it had become instinct. Corporal Wyatt Brennan stood at lane 7, his hands trembling so badly the M4 shook in his grip. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning's relative cool. His breathing came in short, sharp gasps. 20 years old and already carrying ghosts, he'd deployed to Kandahar 8 months ago. 3 months in country before the IED took his squad leader and 2 teammates. He'd been 10 meters behind them, close enough to be showered in debris, far enough to survive physically intact. But the dreams came every night. The sound of the explosion, the screaming, the smell of burning flesh and diesel fuel. His platoon sergeant had noticed the tremors, the hypervigilance, the way Wyatt flinched at sudden sounds. He'd been referred to behavioral health, diagnosed with PTSD, put on a treatment plan that included medication and therapy. But standing on the firing line, surrounded by the crack of rifle fire and the smell of gunpowder, Wyatt was back in Afghanistan, his heart racing, his vision tunneling. Kira noticed. Of course she noticed. She set down the rifle she was cleaning and made her way to his station. Her approach so quiet he didn't hear her until she spoke. "Square your shoulders." Wyatt flinched, nearly dropping his weapon. His finger went dangerously close to the trigger. Muscle memory from some other place trying to take over. "Easy." Her voice was low, meant only for him. gentle without being condescending. Keep your finger indexed along the receiver. Good. Now take a breath. Hold it. Let half out. His breathing steadied almost against his will. The trembling in his hands decreased by measurable degrees. The target isn't the enemy. She adjusted his elbow position with a gentle touch, the kind of correction that came from understanding, not judgment. It's just a piece of paper. Paper can't hurt you. She paused. Let that sink in. Whatever you saw over there, whatever happened, it's not here. You're safe. This is just training. Just practice, nothing more. How did you... He couldn't finish the question, couldn't articulate the confusion, the relief, the sudden understanding that someone else knew, someone else understood. I've seen that look before. She stepped back, giving him space, giving him dignity. You're not alone, Corporal, and it doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Before he could respond, Declan's voice cut across the range like a blade. What the hell do you think you're doing? Kira turned to face him, her expression neutral, professional, giving him nothing to grasp, nothing to use against her. His sight alignment was off. His sight alignment is my concern. Declan stepped into her personal space, using his height to intimidate, his physical presence as a weapon. You touch him one of my trainees again, and I'll have you scrubbing latrines for a month. He paused, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Matter of fact, I think it's time we settled this once and for all. You think you know weapons better than my certified armorer? Let's prove it. He gestured expansively, playing to the crowd that had begun to gather, sensing drama, sensing blood in the water. Disassembly competition, Caleb versus the janitor. Loser admits they don't know what they're talking about. Murmurs rippled through the assembled personnel. Even the trainees could smell what was coming. This wasn't about weapons anymore. This was about power, about putting someone in their place, about maintaining an order that certain people found comfortable. Caleb stepped forward, cracking his knuckles with theatrical confidence. I've been doing this for 6 years, hold expert ratings in 3 weapon platforms. Let's see what cleaning bathrooms teaches you. Whack. Kira didn't move from her station, didn't acknowledge the challenge, didn't give Declan the satisfaction of her response. What's wrong? Declan's voice carried mockery like a weapon, sharp and designed to wound. Scared, or did you finally realize you're out of your depth? I have work to do, Staff Sergeant. Kira's voice remained level, professional. These weapons need to be ready for the afternoon qualification. Work can wait. This is about respect, about knowing your place. Declan stepped closer, using his size to intimidate, his presence as a physical threat. Unless you want me to tell Colonel Voss that you're refusing a direct order. It wasn't a direct order. Everyone knew it, but the power dynamic was clear. The threat implicit. Refuse and face consequences. Comply and face humiliation. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Kira set down her tools with careful precision, each implement placed exactly where it belonged. Then she looked up at Declan. And for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Something that made Boone Mallory, watching from across the yard, straight into attention. Something that looked like calculation. Like someone who'd been holding back for 4 years, deciding that the time for restraint was over. Fine. A space was cleared in the center of the training yard. 2 M4 carbines placed on a table. Identical in every way. Standard military issue. The kind of weapon every soldier in the facility could disassemble in their sleep. Caleb took his position with the swagger of a man who had already won. 6 years of daily practice against a technician who probably barely knew which end the bullets came out of. This would be over in seconds. His superiority confirmed, her place firmly established. Kira stood opposite, her expression blank, her stance relaxed, her breathing steady, waiting. Standard disassembly and reassembly, Declan announced, loving every moment of this. First one to present a function-checked weapon wins. Ready, Caleb nodded, rolling his shoulders, preparing for performance. Kira said nothing, just waited, patient, still. Boone leaned forward slightly. Something in his gut told him this was important, that what happened in the next minute would change everything. Go. Caleb's hands moved with practiced efficiency. The movements of a man who had performed this task thousands of times. Pins out, bolt carrier group free, trigger assembly separated. His fingers flew. Muscle memory taking over. He'd done this blindfolded during training, done it in the dark, done it underwater. 47 seconds later, he slapped the charging handle, pointed the weapon at the ground, pulled the trigger, click, function check complete. Done. He looked up, triumph spreading across his face like sunrise. Then he saw where everyone else was looking. Kira stood motionless, her weapon already reassembled, already function checked. Resting on the table in front of her, her eyes were closed, her breathing was slow and even, her hands were empty. The weapon sat there, complete, functional, ready. Time, someone asked. The word barely more than a whisper. Boone Mallory checked his watch, though he'd been counting in his head from the moment Declan said go. Old habits from coordinating timed operations in Kuwait. 11 seconds. The silence was absolute, not the silence of shock. The silence of witnessing something impossible become real. The silence of understanding that everything you thought you knew was wrong. That's impossible, Caleb breathed. His face had gone pale. No one can. I've seen master armorers who can't. She didn't even look. Someone whispered to the trainee beside them, their voice carrying awe. She did the whole thing with her eyes closed. Warrant Officer Hayes pushed through the crowd. 44 years old. A helicopter pilot who had flown more extract missions than he cared to count. 8 years flying special operations personnel in and out of places that didn't exist on official maps. His eyes locked on Kira with an intensity that made nearby soldiers step aside. He'd seen this before. In operators boarding his aircraft, in the way they prepped their weapons, in the muscle memory so deep they could work in absolute darkness, in conditions where visual confirmation was impossible. What's your call sign? The question cut through the silence like a blade. Kira opened her eyes, met his gaze without flinching. I'm just a maintenance technician, sir. I've flown extract missions for Tier 1 operators for 8 years. Hayes stepped closer, his voice dropping but somehow carrying further. I know what special operations personnel look like when they handle weapons. I know how they move, how they think, how they exist in the world. He paused, studying her face, searching for confirmation of what he already knew. What is your call sign? I don't have one. The lie was smooth, practiced, utterly unconvincing to anyone who knew what to look for. Boone Mallory set down his coffee cup very carefully. His hands steady for 72 years of life and 50 years of service showed the faintest tremor. He'd spent 6 months in '91 embedded with SEAL teams during Desert Storm, reconnaissance operations in Kuwait, hunting Scud missile launchers in the Western Desert. He'd seen the best operators in the world work, knew what true expertise looked like when stripped of rank and ceremony, and what he'd just witnessed was expertise of the highest order. That disassembly time, that level of proficiency. Eyes closed, which meant muscle memory so deep she didn't need visual confirmation. There was only one place that produced operators like that, one place where they drilled until the movements became automatic, until your hands knew what to do before your conscious mind registered the need. The SEALs. Declan wasn't finished. The humiliation of watching a cleaning lady outperform his hand-picked armorer demanded retribution, demanded some way to restore the natural order of things. He snatched a Beretta M9 from the nearest rack, ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber with unnecessary force. Anybody can play with Bosch when you've memorized the movements. Let's see if you can actually shoot. He thrust the weapon toward Kira, his expression savage. Firing range, 50 yards, standard qualification course. Staff Sergeant, Captain Barrett began, finally sensing that this had gone too far. What? She's already proved she thinks she's better than everyone. Declan's smile was cruel, predatory. Let's give her a chance to prove it, unless she wants to admit she's just a parts monkey who got lucky. Kira looked at the Beretta in his outstretched hand. For a long moment, she didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there weighing something that only she could see. I'm not qualified for weapons discharge on this facility, she said finally. I'll qualify you. Declan shoved the weapon into her hands. Right now, move. The crowd followed, sensing drama, sensing something building toward a conclusion they couldn't quite predict. By the time they reached the pistol range, nearly 60 people had gathered, word spreading through the base like wildfire. Something's happening. Something big. Declan loaded a fresh magazine, handed it to Kira with exaggerated care. 15 rounds, 50 yards. Let's see what you've got. Kira approached the firing line with measured steps. She loaded the magazine, chambered around, raised the weapon in a textbook Weaver stance. But something was wrong. Her right hand trembled slightly, a barely perceptible vibration that anyone looking closely could see. Boone noticed. His eyes narrowed. Something about that tremor felt deliberate, controlled, like someone faking weakness. "What's the matter?" Chase Preston called out, emboldened by Declan's presence, by the crowd's anticipation. Scared of a little bang, Kira adjusted her grip, steadied her breathing, and fired. The first round hit 6 inches left of the target. The second went high. By the fifth shot, her grouping was scattered across a 2-foot radius, not a single round touching center mass. Laughter erupted from the crowd, relieved laughter, the natural order restored. The cleaning lady put back in her place. "This is priceless," Caleb crowed, his earlier humiliation forgotten in the joy of someone else's failure. "Fastest disassembly I've ever seen, and she can't hit the broadside of a building." "Technician accuracy," Declan smirked, satisfaction radiating from him like heat. "All theory, no practice. Maybe stick to what you know, sweetheart." Chase was practically dancing with glee. "Should have stayed in your lane." But Boone Mallory wasn't laughing. His eyes had moved past the 50-yard target to the 200-yard marker at the far end of the range. He set down his coffee cup with trembling hands. His breath caught in his throat. 5 holes, grouped so tightly they nearly touched, arranged in a perfect pentagon, at 200 yards. "Holy God," he breathed. Staff Sergeant Blake Ortiz followed his gaze, went pale. She wasn't missing. She was shooting a different target. Boone did the math in his head. 200 yards, iron sights, with a pistol designed for maximum accuracy at 25 yards. The 9mm round would drop approximately 6 feet over that distance. The wind, currently blowing at about 8 miles per hour from the northwest, would push the bullet several inches off course. And she'd compensated for all of it, instinctively, without modern ballistic computers or rangefinders. Put 5 rounds into a pattern that Olympic shooters would struggle to match with proper equipment, while making it look like she was missing the 50-yard target. "Who does that?" Ortiz asked, his voice barely audible over the continuing laughter. "Someone who wanted us to know she could." Boone's voice was flat, final. "Someone who's been holding back, showing us just enough to make a point without revealing what she really is." The laughter died as others began to notice where Boone was looking. One by one heads turned, murmurs replaced mockery. Understanding dawned on faces that had been so certain of their superiority just moments before. Declan's smirk faltered. What is everyone looking at?" Gunnery Sergeant Connor Dalton walked slowly to the 200-yard marker. Marine Scout Sniper, veteran of 3 deployments, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. A man who understood precision in a way most soldiers never would. Who could read wind by watching grass move? Who could estimate range by comparing target size to known dimensions? He stared at the target for a long moment, his weathered face showing something that might have been awe, might have been professional recognition of a peer. Then he turned back to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the range with the weight of professional acknowledgement. 5 rounds, 200-yard target, pentagon grouping. He paused, letting that sink in. With iron sights on a pistol, no magnification, no ballistic computer, just skill. He paused again, making sure everyone understood what they were really looking at. "I've seen Marine Scout snipers who couldn't do that with a rifle. She just did it with a sidearm, to prove a point, without saying a word." "She missed," Declan insisted, but his voice had lost its conviction. The certainty was crumbling. "She clearly missed the target right in front of her. She hit exactly what she was aiming at." Boone stepped forward, positioning himself between Declan and Kira, his 72 years of experience suddenly carrying an authority that rank alone couldn't convey. "The question is why she bothered to make it look like she missed at first." Kira ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, set the weapon down on the bench with careful precision. Her face revealed nothing. No pride, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. "I'm done here." She turned to walk back to her station. "I have work to do." "Hold on." Colonel Voss descended from the observation platform, his stride purposeful. The crowd parted before him like water before a ship's bow. 64 years of command presence made manifest. "Technician Thorne, a word." Kira stopped, stood at attention, waited. That was quite a demonstration. Voss's voice was measured, careful, each word chosen with precision. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "Practice, sir. Lots of practice." "Practice." Voss let the word hang in the air, testing its weight, finding it insufficient. He turned to his aide, Francis Webb, a civilian contractor who handled classified personnel files and security clearances. "Webb, any progress on that file?" The contractor looked up from his laptop, face troubled, more than troubled, disturbed. Sir, I've hit a wall. Her file isn't just locked, it's flagged. Any deeper access attempts trigger an automatic notification to, he trailed off, swallowing hard, to someone I'm not authorized to know about. Voss nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected, as if pieces of a puzzle he'd been working on for 4 years had finally clicked into place. Very well. Carry on, technician. As Kira walked away, Voss caught Boone's eye, gave an almost imperceptible nod, a silent communication between men who'd spent lifetimes learning to speak without words. Something was happening here. Something that went far beyond a simple personality conflict. Something that had been building for 4 years, waiting for exactly the right moment to emerge. And whatever it was about to blow wide open. Declan stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. Everything he'd believed about himself, about strength, about his place in the military hierarchy was collapsing like a building with its foundation removed. But he wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. His rage, his humiliation, his desperate need to restore his sense of dominance was building to a crescendo. And when it broke, the truth about Kira Thorne would be revealed in a way that no one could deny. The afternoon sun climbed higher over Fort Bragg, the heat building with the tension. And in a weapons maintenance bay, a woman who had spent 4 years being invisible was about to step into the light, whether she wanted to or not. Master Sergeant Boone Mallory had seen too many veterans struggle after service. That's why when he'd invested early in veteran-focused financial planning back in the 90s, he'd made sure it was the kind that understood military benefits, VA loans, and transition challenges. Smart money management wasn't just for officers. Every enlisted soldier deserved a secure future. But right now, money was the furthest thing from his mind. He approached Kira at her workstation as the crowd dispersed. The afternoon sun slanted through the armory windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. You know you just painted a target on your back, he said quietly. Kira didn't look up from her work. Her hands continued their methodical inspection of firing pins with the same precision she'd shown all day, every day, for 4 years. There was already a target there, Master Sergeant. Fair enough. Boone leaned against the bench, watching her work, studying the economy of her movements, the unconscious efficiency that spoke of training so deep it had become identity. I worked with SEAL teams during Desert Storm, reconnaissance operations in Kuwait '91. Saw a lot of operators come through. The good ones, the ones who survived, they all had something in common. Kira's hands paused for just a fraction of a second, then continued their work. I wouldn't know anything about that. A certain way of moving, of watching, of waiting. Boone's voice hardened slightly, not with anger but with certainty. The disassembly, the shooting, the way you handled that weapon malfunction this morning with Corporal Brennan. I know what I saw. I know what I'm looking at. For a long moment, Kira said nothing, just continued her inspection, her fingers moving across metal with the delicate precision of a surgeon. Then so quietly that Boone had to lean in to hear she spoke. Some missions don't end when you come home, Master Sergeant. Some people carry them forever. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. With weight that came from experience, Boone could only imagine. Before he could respond, shouting erupted from the tactical training area. Declan had cornered his Rangers for what he claimed was an impromptu close-quarters combat demonstration. But everyone could see what it really was. One last chance to prove dominance. One last opportunity to put the woman who'd humiliated him back in her place. And his choice of volunteer had not been random. You! Declan pointed directly at Kira across the yard, his voice carrying the weight of challenged authority. Get over here! Boone tensed. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Kira set down her tools with careful precision, each implement placed exactly where it belonged. He won't stop until he's proven something, and I'm running out of ways to let him. She walked toward the close-quarters combat pit. The crowd parted around her, 60 soldiers, maybe more now. Word had spread through the base like wildfire. The maintenance tech who shot like a ghost. The cleaning lady who could disassemble a rifle faster than their expert armorer. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Declan stood in the center of the pit, bouncing on the balls of his feet. His grin was sharp and predatory, the expression of a man who'd finally cornered his prey. Since our cleaning lady thinks she's such hot stuff, let's see how she handles actual combat. He gestured expansively to the surrounding trainees. Basic defensive techniques. I'll demonstrate. She'll be my partner. Partner was a generous term. Everyone knew what was coming. This wasn't instruction. This was retribution. This was about restoring an order that had been challenged, questioned, undermined by someone who should have known better than to rise above her station. Kira stepped into the pit without hesitation. She stood in a neutral stance, hands at her sides, face empty of expression. But Boone noticed what others might have missed. Her breathing was controlled, measured. Her pulse visible at her throat remained steady. Her weight was distributed perfectly, ready to move in any direction. She wasn't nervous. She was waiting. First technique, Declan circled her like a shark. What to do when someone grabs you from behind. He moved fast, faster than necessary for a demonstration, his arm wrapped around Kira's throat in a chokehold that was just a little too tight. Professional enough to claim instruction, personal enough to hurt. In a real situation, you'd be dead already. His voice was pitched for the audience. But let's pretend you have time to react. What would you do? Kira didn't answer, didn't struggle, just stood there, his arm crushing her windpipe, her face beginning to redden from restricted blood flow. Nothing. Declan increased the pressure slightly, not enough to cause serious damage, just enough to make breathing difficult, just enough to make the humiliation complete. Maybe you should tap out, admit you're in over your head. Still nothing, but Boone noticed something the others missed. Kira's breathing hadn't changed. Despite the chokehold, despite the pressure, her heart rate remained steady. The pulse at her throat, what he could see of it around Declan's arm, beat with metronomic precision. She wasn't panicking. She was waiting, choosing her moment with the patience of someone who'd learned that survival often meant knowing exactly when to act. Fine, let me show everyone what happens when you freeze up in combat. Declan shifted his grip, preparing to take her to the ground in a move that would be humiliating at best, injurious at worst. Kira moved. Her elbow drove backward into his solar plexus. Not hard enough to injure, but enough to loosen his grip. Just enough to create space. Her hips dropped and rotated, her center of gravity shifting beneath his in a movement so fluid it seemed choreographed. One hand caught his wrist, the other pressed against his elbow joint. And suddenly Declan was airborne. He flipped over her shoulder, his 195-pound frame moving through space with the helpless grace of a thrown doll. He landed flat on his back in the sand. The impact drove the air from his lungs in an explosive gasp. Time elapsed 1.4 seconds. Kira released him immediately, stepped back to her neutral position, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just thrown a man nearly twice her size with less effort than it took to lift a rifle. The silence was deafening. Declan scrambled to his feet, face crimson with rage and humiliation. Sand clung to his uniform, his carefully maintained appearance shattered. Lucky throw, let's go again. He charged at her, abandoning all pretense of instruction. His fist swung toward her face in an attack that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with wounded pride. Kira's head slipped to the side, the blow missing by millimeters. Her hand caught his wrist, redirecting his momentum, using his own force against him. And suddenly he was past her, stumbling, off balance. His attack turned into awkward forward motion. She didn't pursue, didn't counterattack, just returned to her neutral stance and waited. Come on. Declan spun, his composure completely shattered. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool afternoon air. Fight back, stop running. I'm not running, Staff Sergeant. Kira's voice was calm, almost gentle, the tone of someone explaining something obvious to a child. I'm defending. There's a difference. He came at her again, faster this time, more desperate, a combination of strikes designed to overwhelm through sheer aggression, haymakers and body shots thrown with the wild abandon of someone who'd lost all tactical sense. Kira flowed around them like water, redirecting, deflecting, never retaliating, never escalating. Each movement was precise, economical, almost beautiful in its efficiency. The difference between someone who'd learned violence as theory and someone who'd perfected it as art. Chase Preston, seeing his mentor humiliated, decided to intervene. He launched himself at Kira from behind, arms outstretched to tackle her, the loyal follower coming to his leader's aid, desperate to prove his value through violence. Kira heard him coming. Of course she heard him coming. Without turning, she stepped aside at the last possible moment. Her hand caught his outstretched arm, using his own momentum against him. Chase went sprawling into the sand. His attack turned into an ungraceful tumble. Now she faced both of them, Declan in front, Chase scrambling up from behind. They exchanged a glance. Some unspoken agreement passed between them. 2 against 1. Surely the numbers would make the difference. They attacked together. What happened next would be discussed in hushed whispers for months afterward. Would become legend among the trainees who witnessed it. Would be the story that new recruits heard when they asked about the maintenance tech who everyone treated with careful respect. Kira dropped low, sweeping Chase's legs out from under him while simultaneously blocking Declan's downward strike. She rose like a wave, flowing past Chase's falling body. Her movement put him between her and Declan, turning his ally into an obstacle. When Declan tried to circle around, she was already repositioning, always keeping her attackers in front of her, always maintaining control of the space, using geometry and positioning to compensate for size and strength. In under 10 seconds, both men were on the ground, breathing hard, unable to land a single clean hit. And Kira hadn't thrown a single offensive strike. Every movement had been defensive. Control without injury, dominance without violence. Enough! Colonel Voss's voice cracked across the pit like a whip. Everyone froze. The spell broken by command authority that transcended the immediate chaos. Voss descended into the pit, his face carved from stone. 64 years of military service compressed into an expression that promised consequences. Staff Sergeant Kane, explain yourself. Declan struggled to his feet, sand coating his uniform like shame made visible. Sir, I was conducting a training demonstration. What I saw was an instructor attacking a civilian support staff member. Voss's voice dropped to a dangerous register, the kind of quiet that was more threatening than shouting. What I saw was a coordinated assault by 2 soldiers on a single unarmed woman. Sir, she defended herself without causing injury to either of you. Voss stepped closer, his presence filling the pit with the weight of absolute authority, which is more than you deserve. He paused, letting the moment build, letting Declan understand the weight of what came next. Report to my office, now. Declan's mouth opened and closed, his face cycled through emotions too quickly to track. Finally, he managed to strangle out, yes, sir. As he trudged away, Chase limping behind him, Voss turned to Kira. Something complicated moved behind his eyes. Recognition, respect, and something that looked almost like apology. Are you injured, Technician Thorne? No, sir. Good. He paused, seemed to wrestle with something. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of knowledge, carefully revealed. That was Krav Maga, combined with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and something else, something more refined, more specific. Kira met his gaze without flinching. I've picked up things here and there, sir. Here and there, Voss nodded slowly, the ghost of a smile touching his weathered face. Of course you have. He turned and walked away, leaving Kira standing alone in the center of the pit, surrounded by silent, staring soldiers who were beginning to understand that everything they had assumed about the small woman in the oil-stained uniform was wrong. The afternoon unfolded with the inevitability of a gathering storm. Declan sat in Colonel Voss's office for 47 minutes. When he emerged, his face was pale and his swagger was gone. He returned to the training yard with the careful movements of a man walking on broken glass. But he wasn't finished. Humiliation festered in him like an infected wound, demanding release, demanding some way to restore what had been taken. He found Kira at her workstation, methodically preparing weapons for the afternoon qualification round. The crowd had dispersed, most personnel moving to the mess hall for lunch. Only a handful of witnesses remained. You think you're clever, don't you? His voice was low, venomous, the quiet fury of someone who'd lost everything and needed someone to blame, making me look bad in front of everyone. Kira didn't look up. Her hands continued their work with the same methodical precision. I was just defending myself, Staff Sergeant. You were showing off, playing games, Vorshrei. He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell the kafi on his breath, the sweat of assertion and fear. But here's the thing about games, I always win. I'm not playing any games. Then what are you playing at? His hand shot out, grabbing the front of her uniform, bunching the fabric in his fist. Who are you, really? Where did you learn to fight like that? Why is your file locked behind level 5 clearance? Let go of me. Kira's voice remained level, but something had changed, a hardness entering her tone that hadn't been there before. Not until you answer my questions. His grip tightened, pulling her slightly off balance. You've been here 4 years. 4 years of acting like you're invisible, and suddenly you're disarming panicked trainees and throwing trained rangers around like dolls. Nobody's that good. Nobody. Chase appeared at his shoulder, his expression eager despite the bruises forming on his face, despite the humiliation of being swept aside like a child. Maybe she's a foreign operative, planted here to gather intel. Shut up, Chase. But Declan's eyes didn't leave Kira's face. I'm going to find out what you're hiding, and when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're a fraud. He shoved her backward. Kira stumbled, her hip catching the edge of the workbench. Her shirt pulled tight across her shoulder. The aged fabric, stressed beyond its limit, gave way, and with a sound like tearing paper, the seams split. Time stopped. Because they're exposed on her right shoulder was a tattoo that every soldier in the United States military would recognize instantly. A golden eagle, wings spread wide in flight, clutching a trident in one talon and a flintlock pistol in the other, surrounded by an anchor, the symbol of naval heritage, and below it in stark black letters that seemed to burn against her skin. Task Unit, 2015. The Trident, the symbol of the Navy SEALs, the most elite special operations force in the world, the warriors who operated in shadows, whose missions were never acknowledged, whose very existence was often classified. Chase made a sound like a dying animal, a whimper of recognition and sudden absolute terror. Boone Mallory, who had been approaching with questions of his own, stopped dead in his tracks. His hand rose to his forehead in an automatic salute before his conscious mind even registered what he was seeing. Senior Chief, the words came out as a breath, as a prayer, as an acknowledgement of something sacred. The handful of soldiers still present turned to look, saw the tattoo, understood what it meant. And one by one they came to attention, standing at rigid attention, rendering salutes with precision born of shock and sudden, overwhelming respect. Declan's hand, still gripping Kira's torn shirt, began to tremble. His face went from red to white to a sickly gray, because he understood what he'd just done, what he'd been doing for 4 years. And the magnitude of his mistake was crushing him like a physical weight. Colonel Voss emerged from his office at the sound of the commotion, took in the scene with a single glance. Kira's torn shirt, the exposed tattoo, the stunned faces. And something shifted in his expression. Authority settled over him like a mantle, transforming him from base commander to something more. Something that spoke of classified briefings and operations that existed only in sealed files. Senior Chief Kyra Thorne, his voice carried across the training yard, commanding attention from every person within earshot. Call sign Phantom, SEAL Team 6, 9 combat deployments, 58 confirmed operations. The words fell like hammer blows, each one striking with the weight of absolute truth. Around them, soldiers were beginning to emerge from buildings, drawn by the commotion, by the sound of Voss's voice carrying across the base with unusual intensity. Within minutes, every person on the training complex would know, would hear, would understand. Operation Scarlet Dawn, Raqqa, Syria, March 2017. Voss paused, letting the weight of what came next settle over everyone present. She held a defensive position for 14 hours under continuous enemy fire, with a penetrating chest wound, killed 23 enemy combatants, saved 18 American lives. Sloan Barrett had tears streaming down her face. I knew it, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. God, I knew she was something. Wyatt Brennan, the young trainee Kira had helped that morning, was openly weeping. His hands shook, but not from fear this time, from overwhelming emotion, from the sudden understanding of who had helped him, who had seen his pain and recognized it. She knew about my PTSD, he managed through tears. She understood because she lived it. The only reason you haven't heard her name, Voss's voice cut through the gathering crowd, is because everything about that operation is classified above your clearance level, above my clearance level. Senior Chief Thorne is a ghost, an asset whose very existence is compartmentalized beyond normal channels. Gunnery Sergeant Connor Dalton snapped to attention and rendered a parade ground perfect salute. Senior Chief, his voice carried across the yard, and one by one every soldier in sight followed suit. Trainees, instructors, officers, support staff. They rose to their feet and saluted the small woman standing alone by the workbench, her torn shirt exposing the symbol of her silent sacrifice. Voss stepped forward, his voice softening slightly, carrying now not just command, but something deeper, something that sounded like respect earned through shared understanding of classified truths. Decorations include the Navy Cross, the Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts. 4 years ago, you were medically discharged after sustaining injuries that should have killed you 3 times over. You disappeared from all official records, and you came here. He paused, meeting her eyes across the distance. Why? Kira returned the salutes with military precision. Her face still revealed little, but Boone thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Not satisfaction, not vindication, something softer, something that looked like relief. Because I needed to learn how to be human again, sir, instead of just a weapon. The words hung in the air like a confession, like a truth spoken after 4 years of silence. Captain Barrett stepped forward, his face gray with shame. The training officer who had dismissed her with a glance now stood at rigid attention, saluting with a precision that suggested desperation. Senior Chief, I owe you an apology. His voice cracked, the professional veneer shattering. I failed in my duty as an officer. I prioritized convenience over justice. There is no excuse. Kira's expression didn't change, but when she spoke, her voice carried a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything they'd just learned about her. There's no need for apologies, Captain, but there is need for change. Barrett nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, Senior Chief, there is. Caleb Morrison fell to his knees in the sand. His face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray. I challenged a SEAL to a disassembly competition, he said to no one in particular. His voice held the hollow quality of someone in shock. I challenged a SEAL. I am the stupidest person alive. Veronica Ashford had vanished, presumably fleeing to her office to begin damage control on a career that was already over. Her personnel file inquiry, her poisonous whispers, her systematic sabotage, all of it now recorded against her name, all of it now evidence of her failure to recognize excellence when it stood before her. Chase Preston sat in the sand where he'd fallen, rocking slightly, his face blank with shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. Tears began streaming down his face. I called her. I said she should stay in the kitchen. I pushed her. I laughed when he couldn't finish. And Declan Kane stood where he had been standing when he'd grabbed Kira's shirt. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. His hand was still extended, frozen in the moment of his final mistake. His face had gone the color of old ash, and his eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone whose entire world had just collapsed. Voss approached him slowly, deliberately, each step measured and final. Staff Sergeant Kane. The colonel's voice was soft, but it carried. Everyone heard, everyone would remember. You just assaulted a decorated Special Operations veteran, a Navy Cross recipient, a Purple Heart holder 3 times over. Declan's mouth moved, but no sound came out. His hand began to tremble. You questioned her competence, her knowledge, her right to be here. Voss stepped closer, until he was inches from Declan's face. You had the audacity, the sheer arrogance to tell a woman who has killed more enemy combatants than you've ever seen in photographs to stay in her lane. A sound escaped Declan's throat. It might have been a whimper. It might have been the last gasp of dying pride. Consider your career over. Voss turned away. The gesture itself a form of dismissal. MPs, please escort Staff Sergeant Kane to the detention facility, pending court-martial proceedings. 2 military police officers materialized from the crowd, their faces carefully neutral as they took positions on either side of the stunned ranger. Declan's legs seemed to fail him. The MPs had to support most of his weight as they led him away. His feet dragged in the sand, leaving twin trails behind him like the wake of something sinking. Chase was next, the young soldier still sitting when the MPs approached. Private First Class Preston, you are under arrest for assault on a senior NSARTRO. I didn't know. The words tumbled out in a panicked rush. I didn't know who she was. I swear I didn't know that, Kira said quietly, her voice cutting through Chase's panic with surgical precision, is precisely the problem. Everyone turned to look at her. The small woman with the torn shirt and the revealed tattoo, and the eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. You treated me the way you did because you thought I was nobody. She looked at Chase, then at the gathered soldiers, her voice calm, measured, but carrying to every corner of the silent yard. Because you thought I was beneath you. Your behavior was the problem, and it would have been just as wrong if I actually was just a maintenance technician. The words hung in the air like a verdict, like a judgment that couldn't be appealed. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's rank or status. Kira's gaze swept across the assembled personnel, meeting eyes, holding them. Every person on this base volunteered to serve their country. They all deserve dignity. Sloan Barrett wiped her eyes and nodded, standing straighter, understanding something fundamental about service, about respect, about what it meant to wear the uniform. Wyatt Brennan straightened his shoulders, his hands steady for the first time all day. Faye Donovan approached slowly, carefully, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter the moment. When she reached Kira, she didn't salute, didn't stand at attention. She just wrapped her arms around the smaller woman and held on. "I knew," Faye whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "God help me, I knew there was something special about you." Kira returned the embrace, and for the first time since the confrontation began, her composure cracked slightly, not breaking, but bending, showing the human being beneath the warrior's mask. "You were kind to me when you didn't have to be, Faye. That means more than you know." When they separated, Faye's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You could have put them in the hospital. Both of them. I saw how you held back." "I held back because hurting them wouldn't have solved anything." Kira glanced toward the detention facility where Declan and Chase were being processed. "Their careers are over. Their reputations are destroyed. That's punishment enough. It's more than they deserve." "Maybe," Kira's voice dropped, "but I didn't join the military to hurt people. I joined to protect them, even from themselves." Boone approached next, his expression complicated, respect mixed with something that looked like vindication. "Senior Chief, I worked with SEALs during Desert Storm. I thought I'd seen everything they could do." "Every operator's different, Master Sergeant." "I know, but what you did in that pit," he shook his head. "You weren't fighting them. You were teaching them. Every move you made was designed to control without injuring, to dominate without destroying." Kira shrugged slightly. "They were idiots, not enemies. There's a difference." A surprised laugh escaped Boone before he could stop it. "Permission to speak freely. Senior Chief?" "Granted. You're exactly what this place needs, what the whole military needs." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Take the job Colonel Voss is going to offer you. Teach the next generation what real strength looks like." Kira was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant. "I'll think about it, Master Sergeant. I promise." As the training day resumed around her, Kira returned to her workstation. The weapons still needed maintenance. The trainees still needed equipment. Her job, whatever name it carried in the personnel database, hadn't changed. But everything else had. The torn shirt hung awkwardly on her shoulder, the tattoo still visible to anyone who looked. She made no effort to cover it. The secret was out. The ghost had been revealed. 4 years of invisibility ended by a single moment of violence from a man who couldn't accept being wrong. Colonel Voss found her there 2 hours later, working as if nothing had happened, as if her entire world hadn't just been turned inside out. "Senior Chief, my office, now." It wasn't a request. Kira set down her tools, wiped her hands on a rag, and followed him across the yard. Soldiers who'd ignored her for 4 years now stepped aside with respect. Trainees who'd never learned her name now knew exactly who she was. The transformation was complete, total, irreversible. Voss's office was austere, functional, the space of a career soldier who valued efficiency over comfort. A secure phone sat on the desk, its light blinking red, insistent, demanding attention. "That phone has been ringing for the past 30 minutes, Voss said, closing the door behind them. "The encryption is level 7. I've only seen that twice before in my career." He paused, meeting her eyes. Both times it concerned operations that officially don't exist. Kira looked at the phone, at the blinking light, at the colonel who was watching her with eyes that knew too much. "Answer it," Voss said quietly. "I'll give you privacy." "Sir." "Whatever this is about, Senior Chief." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Thank you. For today. For everything." He left, closing the door with a soft click. Kira stared at the phone for a long moment. 4 years of silence. 4 years of being invisible. Of being nobody. Of trying to forget who she'd been and what she'd done. 4 years of peace. Fragile and temporary, but peace nonetheless. The light blinked. Red, insistent, demanding. She picked up the receiver. "This is Thorne." "Phantom." The voice was female, heavily modulated, unrecognizable, but something in the cadence was familiar. Something that triggered memories she'd tried to bury. The rhythm of speech, the slight pause between certain words. A pattern she'd heard before, long ago, in training, in her early days, from someone who had pushed her harder than anyone else. But the modulation was too heavy, the connection too brief. She couldn't be certain. "Welcome back." Who is this? A friend, an old colleague. A pause, carefully calculated. It doesn't matter. We've been watching your progress. The Wounded Warrior program, the maintenance work, the incident today. Kira's grip tightened on the receiver. You've been surveilling me. We've been waiting for you. There's a difference. We have a mission, Phantom, one that requires your specific skill set. I'm retired. Medical discharge. Kira's voice hardened. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. Even if it concerns Raven. The name hit her like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The office around her seemed to tilt, reality shifting on an axis that had suddenly lost its center. Raven is dead, she managed finally. The words came out rough, scraped raw by 4 years of grief. KIA, Raqqa, I saw him fall. You saw him fall. You assumed the worst. Everyone did. The voice softened slightly, almost gentle. But he's alive, Phantom. We have confirmation as of 96 hours ago. Kira sank into Voss's chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. That's impossible. We have satellite imagery, signal intercepts, human intelligence from assets on the ground. A pause. I can send you the file if you don't believe me. Why are you telling me this? Because we're mounting a recovery operation and we want you on the team. Kira closed her eyes. Garrett Sullivan, Raven, her spotter, her teammate, her friend, the man who had covered her retreat in Raqqa, who had drawn fire while she evacuated wounded, who had fallen in a hail of bullets she had been unable to prevent, who she had carried in her heart like a stone for 4 years. A weight that never lessened, a guilt that never eased. She saw it again, the rooftop, the building collapsing, fire and smoke everywhere. Raven's voice on the radio steady even as the world fell apart around him. Go, Phantom, I'll hold them. Mission first. Not without you, Raven, not again. You don't have a choice, they need you. Get them out. That's an order to Senior Chief. The explosion, the screams swallowed by chaos, the silence that followed. She'd carried 14 wounded out that day, held position for 14 hours with a piece of rebar through her lung, called in air support, coordinated medevac, and left Raven behind. When the word came out as a whisper, briefing is at 0500 tomorrow. We'll send transport. I haven't agreed to anything. You haven't disagreed either. The voice took on a hint of warmth. The easy days are over, Phantom. But then again, when were they ever easy for people like us? The line went dead. Kira sat motionless in the gathering darkness. The phone still pressed to her ear, her mind a battlefield of warring emotions. Grief, hope, fear, determination. 4 years of trying to be someone else. Trying to forget, trying to heal. All of it crumbling in the space of a single phone call. Through the window, she could see the training yard where everything had changed, where her secret had been exposed, her past revealed, her future rewritten. Somewhere down there, Faye was probably starting her evening shift. Sloan was probably reviewing the day's training. Wyatt was probably fighting his demons with the courage of a soldier who refused to surrender. And Declan Kane was probably sitting in a cell, contemplating the ruins of his career, understanding perhaps for the first time that rank meant nothing without character, that strength without restraint was just brutality, that the woman he tried to break had been stronger than him all along. Kira reached into her pocket and pulled out something she'd been carrying for 4 years. A challenge coin, standard issue, worn smooth by time and touch. She turned it over in her fingers, the metal familiar, comforting in its weight. On the reverse side, almost hidden in the intricate design, was a name, Raven. But there was something else, something she'd never noticed in all the time she'd held this coin. On the very edge, nearly invisible unless you knew to look, were 2 letters engraved in script so fine it could have been a scratch. Kira traced the letters with her thumb. Who was LT, and why did Voss have their coin? Why had he given it to her specifically? A thought flickered. The voice on the phone, the familiar cadence, the training, the pushing. Lydia Thorne, her instructor, the woman who'd made her into a SEAL, who'd pushed her through BUD/S from 2009 to 2011, who'd been harder on her than anyone else because she saw potential no one else did. Was it possible the thought vanished before she could grasp it fully? Too distant, too uncertain. But the seed was planted. She pocketed the coin and walked to the window. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, the same stars she'd watched from a rooftop in Raqqa, while her lung filled with blood, while her teammates evacuated, while Raven held the line and then fell. disappearing into smoke and chaos. 4 years ago, she had walked away from the life of a warrior, broken in body and spirit, carrying the weight of everyone she couldn't save, everyone she'd left behind. The guilt had nearly destroyed her. The grief had nearly won. Tonight she would become Phantom again. And this time she wouldn't leave anyone behind. The military detention facility at Fort Bragg was designed to be exactly what it needed to be. Functional, sterile, a place where soldiers who'd crossed lines came to understand consequences. Declan Kane sat on the edge of a narrow bunk in cell number 7. His uniform had been replaced by standard-issue detention fatigues. His combat patch, the one he'd worn like armor for 11 years, was gone. Everything was gone. Court-martial proceedings would begin in 72 hours. The evidence was overwhelming. The witnesses numerous. His career in the United States Army was over. Everyone knew it, including him. But for the first time in over a decade, Declan wasn't thinking about his career. He was thinking about the truth he'd spent years running from. The military chaplain, Captain Richard Lawrence, sat across from him in the small visiting area. 60 years old, 2 deployments to Iraq as a combat chaplain, eyes that had seen men break and sometimes rarely rebuild. "Why did you target Senior Chief Thorne?" Lawrence's voice was gentle, not judgmental, just asking. Declan was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands, hands that had grabbed a decorated war hero's uniform, hands that had struck someone who'd saved 18 American lives while dying herself. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow, "Because she was everything I pretended to be." The chaplain waited, silence doing the work that questions couldn't. "My father was Colonel Marcus Kane, Gulf War veteran, Purple Heart, Bronze Star. He was everything a soldier should be." Declan's words came slowly, each one pulled from somewhere deep, somewhere he'd locked away for years. The memory came unbidden, unwanted, but undeniable. He was 9 years old, 2000, the new millennium everyone had worried about. Y2K had come and gone without disaster, but his personal disasters were just beginning. Dinner table in their base housing unit at Fort Benning. His father across from him, still in uniform, always in uniform. Young Declan had knocked over his glass of milk. An accident, the kind children make. His father's face had gone cold. "Clean it up. A soldier doesn't make mistakes." "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean..." "I don't want excuses. I want results." His father's voice was flat, empty of warmth. "Men don't fail, Declan. Warriors dominate or they're nothing. Which are you going to be? I'll be better, I promise. Promises are wind, wishing is what matters, and your actions tell me you're weak." The pattern continued for years. Nothing was ever good enough. Every mistake was proof of fundamental inadequacy. Every achievement was dismissed as insufficient. His father died in 2011. Heart attack. Declan was 21. At the funeral, Declan wore his dress blues, accepted condolences, listened to stories about his father's heroism, and felt nothing but relief mixed with crushing failure. Relief that the judgment was over. Failure that he'd never measured up. The memory shifted again. Fast forwarded, Afghanistan, 2014. Declan was 23, his first combat deployment. Everything he'd trained for, everything he'd worked toward. The chance to finally prove to his dead father that he was worthy. The Taliban ambush came at dawn, Helmand Province. His squad was moving through a compound when the first shots cracked across the courtyard. Declan froze. 3 seconds, maybe 4. A lifetime in combat. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez moved to cover him, drew fire, took 3 rounds to the chest, died because Declan couldn't move. The after-action report was cleaned up. Casualty during enemy contact. No mention of hesitation, no mention of failure. Declan was quietly transferred to training command. Leadership development opportunity. Everyone knew what it really meant. You're not combat material. You're not your father. You never will be. So he wore the combat patch from a training accident, claimed it was from deployment, let people assume he'd earned it in fire, and he built a wall around the truth, brick by brick, lie by lie, until that wall became who he was. "I saw her that first day she arrived," Declan said, bringing himself back to the present, to the chaplain sitting across from him, to the cell that was now his reality. 4 years ago, Kira Thorne, quiet, kept to herself, did her job. "And you targeted her immediately." "No, not at first." Declan shook his head. "At first I didn't notice her at all. Nobody did. She was just there, background, support staff." "So what changed?" "I started watching her. The way she moved, the way she worked. There was something about her that he struggled for words. She had this presence, this calm, even when people were yelling, even when things went wrong. She just handled it. The chaplain nodded, understanding dawning. She reminded you of your father. No, Declan's voice was sharp, then softer. She reminded me of what I wasn't, what I could never be. Every time I looked at her, I saw my own inadequacy reflected back. So you tried to break her. I tried to prove she was fake, that her competence was an act, that underneath she was as weak as he couldn't finish, as weak as you believed yourself to be. Declan's hands clenched into fists. When her shirt tore today, when I saw that tattoo. SEAL Team 6, Navy Cross, Purple Heart, 3 times. His voice cracked. I realized I'd been attacking someone who was 10 times the warrior my father ever was, 100 times the warrior I could ever hope to be. And now I have to live with what I've done to her, to Chase Preston, who followed my example, to every trainee who watched me abuse authority and thought that was what leadership looked like. The chaplain was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward. Recognition is the first step, Declan. Redemption is possible, but it's a long road, and there are no guarantees. I know. Declan looked up, met the chaplain's eyes. I want to write to her, not for forgiveness. I don't deserve that, but to acknowledge the truth, to take responsibility. After the chaplain left, Declan sat alone with pen and paper. He wrote for 2 hours, crossed out lines, started over. The words came hard. Truth always did when you'd spent years running from it. Finally, he had something that felt honest. Senior Chief Thorne, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I see clearly now what I was too afraid to see before. You represented everything I pretended to be but wasn't. Every time I looked at you, I saw my own failure reflected back. So I tried to destroy you before you could expose what I really was. I'm 34 years old. 11 years since Afghanistan. 11 years since Sergeant Rodriguez died because I froze. I've been running from that truth my entire adult life. Running by attacking anyone who reminded me of my inadequacy. I'm done running. I have 5 years in this cell to figure out who I want to be instead of who I've been pretending to be. There's no guarantee I'll succeed. Redemption isn't a right. It's earned through years of consistent action. But I'm trying. Every day. One day at a time. You showed me what real strength looks like. Not through violence, but through restraint. You could have broken me. Instead, you let the consequences of my own actions do what needed doing. Thank you for that, for showing me the difference between a warrior and a bully. I'm writing this not for you, but because I need to own the truth, finally, completely. If I ever get the chance to prove I've changed, I'll take it. Until then, I'll keep working. Declan Kane, he folded the letter, addressed the envelope. And for the first time in 11 years, Declan Kane felt something that might, with a lot of work, eventually become peace. The black SUV arrived at Kiera's quarters at 0430. She was already waiting, go bag packed, modified Glock 19 holstered at her thigh, body armor secured, combat fatigues that hadn't seen use in 4 years, fitting like a second skin. It felt like coming home. The 40-minute drive to the secure facility passed in silence. The building appeared unremarkable from outside. Chain-link fence, concrete walls, guard station with soldiers checking credentials with unusual thoroughness. Inside, everything changed. State-of-the-art communications equipment lined the walls. Digital displays showed satellite imagery of terrain Kiera recognized immediately. The Syria-Iraq border, her old hunting ground. A woman stood at the center of the room. Tall, athletic, close-cropped gray hair, posture of someone accustomed to command. When she turned, Kiera saw eyes that had seen too much. Merved too much, carried too much. Phantom. The woman's voice carried authority without arrogance. Thank you for coming. You can call me Shepard. It's not my name, but it will do. Kiera shook her hand, noting the strength in the grip. The scars on the knuckles that spoke of violence survived. You're the one who called. I am. Shepard gestured to the tactical display. Let me introduce you to your team. 2 men stood near the communication station. Both carried themselves with controlled readiness. This is Ghost, a man in his late 30s, Scottish heritage evident. Former Delta, explosive specialist. Ghost nodded, his pale eyes assessing. Heard about you, Phantom. The Fort Bragg thing's already legendary. And this is Wraith, a man in his mid-30s, Irish features. Former DevGru, communications and infiltration. Wraith extended his hand. Senior Chief, honored to work with you. 4 operators for a rescue in hostile territory. Kira looked at Shepard. Small team. Minimal footprint, maximum deniability. Shepard's expression was neutral. This operation doesn't exist. If something goes wrong, there's no cavalry, no extraction, no acknowledgement we were ever there. Black Ops. Kira knew the drill. Why me? Why not someone active duty? Shepard was quiet for a moment, weighing disclosure. Because Raven asked for you, specifically, by name. The words hit Kira like a physical blow. What? 6 months ago, our asset made brief contact. 90 seconds before guards returned. Raven gave her a message. Shepard pulled up surveillance photos. Raven's face. Thinner, bearded, marked by captivity, but alive. He said, "Tell Phantom I'm still here. Tell her the easy days are over." Kira closed her eyes, fighting tears. The easy days are over. Their phrase, their code. From training, from deployments, from moments when survival meant becoming harder than circumstances. "He knew we'd come," she whispered. "He knew you'd come." Shepard corrected gently. "He held hope because he believed in you." Kira opened her eyes, her voice steady as steel. "Brief me. I want to know everything." The briefing lasted 2 hours. Kira absorbed every detail with operator focus. Guard schedules, patrol patterns, structural weaknesses, emergency protocols. By the end, she'd memorized the compound layout thoroughly, could walk through it mentally, visualizing every turn, every door, every angle. The plan was simple. All good plans were: helo insert 12 kilometers out, approach on foot, breach at 0200 when guard rotation created a 90-second vulnerability window, extract Raven, exfil before dawn, simple, clean. 1,000 things could go wrong beneath the surface. "Any questions?" Shepard asked. "When do we leave?" 1800 tonight. 12 hours to rest and prepare. I strongly suggest you sleep." The quarters were sparse, functional, a bunk locker bathroom. She showered, washing away her old life, preparing mentally for what came next. Sleep came surprisingly fast, but the dreams came too. Raqqa, fire and smoke, holding position while her lung filled with blood. Raven's voice on the radio. "Go Phantom, I'll hold them. Mission first." "Not without you. You don't have a choice. Get them out." "That's an order." Explosion, scream, silence. She woke at 16:30. Internal clock more reliable than any alarm. 2 hours to transform from Kira Thorne maintenance technician into Phantom. SEAL operator. Warrior? She dressed in tactical gear. Black fatigues, body armor, load-bearing vest with ammunition, medical supplies, communications equipment. Each item examined, verified, secured with methodical precision. Modified Glock into its thigh holster. Extra magazines distributed for weight and accessibility. Combat knife secured at her back, angled for rapid cross-draw. When she emerged, Ghost and Wraith were waiting. Both had undergone similar transformations. They nodded, silent acknowledgement between operators. Shepard met them in the briefing room. "Final checks complete. Transport is ready. Any last words?" Kira looked at her team, strangers who would trust her with their lives based on reputation and professional respect. "Just one thing. Whatever happens out there, whatever we face, we don't leave anyone behind. Not again. Not ever." Ghost and Wraith exchanged a glance, then nodded in unison, the gesture carrying oath weight. "Outstanding," Ghost said. "Hooyah," Wraith added. The modified Black Hawk had no markings. Noise suppression technology made it nearly silent at altitude. As Kira climbed aboard, familiar sensations settled over her. The calm before the storm. The quiet when preparation was complete and only action remained. The flight took 6 hours. Kira spent most in silence, reviewing parameters, visualizing the compound, running contingencies, preparing her mind. When the pilot announced approach, Kira felt her pulse quicken. Not from fear, from anticipation. This was what she'd been made for. Save lives, bring people home, make the impossible possible through skill, determination, and willingness to pay whatever price success demanded. The helicopter touched down in a dry riverbed. Rotors kicked up dust clouds, obscuring everything beyond arm's reach. Kira was out before the skids fully settled, boots hitting ground with familiar crunch of Middle Eastern sand. Ghost and Wraith flanked her, weapons ready, eyes scanning darkness. "Clear," Ghost reported, voice barely above whisper. "Move out." Kira took point, leading them into the night. 12 kilometers of hostile territory between them and Raven. They moved in tactical formation, three shadows flowing across desert like water. No lights, no sound beyond soft boot crunch and measured breathing. Hours passed, desert stretched endlessly, featureless except for occasional rock formations. Kira's legs burned, her injured lung protested, but she pushed through pain. Drawing on reserves built through years of training, hardened through years of combat. Pain was temporary, failure was permanent. They reached the compound at 0155, smaller than satellite imagery suggested. Buildings surrounded by makeshift wall, guard towers at corners, spotlights sweeping in predictable patterns, security assuming competent defenders and incompetent attackers. They would learn differently. Kira raised binoculars, scanning until she found it, second floor window. Behind the glass barely visible, a figure sitting motionless, waiting, hoping, believing someone would come. Target confirmed, she whispered. Ghost and Wraith took positions, weapons trained on guard towers. Guards rotated exactly as predicted. For 90 seconds, the north wall was unwatched. Vulnerability born of routine. A window closing faster than most could react. But they weren't most people. Go. Over the wall in 3 seconds. Inside the compound, they split. Ghost and Wraith to guard posts, Kira to the main building. She reached the door, lockpicks in hand. 4 seconds. Lock clicked. She slipped inside. Darkness swallowing her. The hallway was exactly as described. Dark, silent, smelling of dust and dying hope. She moved like a ghost, clearing corners by instinct, checking doors with touches barely registering. Up the stairs, steps making no sound. The room at the hall's end, simple wooden door with heavy padlock. Kira's picks went to work, fingers moving with surgical precision, feeling the mechanism, understanding its secrets. The lock clicked. She pushed the door, and there he was, Garrett Sullivan, Raven, 4 years older, 30 pounds lighter, eyes that had seen too much darkness, but alive, breathing, real. Phantom. His voice was ragged, rough from disuse and emotion. I knew you'd come. She crossed in 3 strides, knelt beside him, hands working on chains. We're getting you out. Chains fell. Raven slumped forward. She caught him, supporting his weight. Can you walk? I can trip on you. That's all I ask. She keyed her radio. Ghost, Wraith, package secured, beginning extraction. Copy, we're clear. Move to exfil. Down the stairs, through the hallway, out the door. The compound was quiet, guards neutralized, way clear, too easy. Kira felt neck hairs rise. Years in combat zones had taught her to trust that instinct. Move faster, she urged. Something's wrong. Halfway to the wall, lights blazed on, spotlights turning night into day with brutal suddenness, sirens wailing, armed men pouring from every building. Contact, Ghost's voice crackled. Multiple hostiles, all directions. It was a trap. They'd known. Kira intercepted radio chatter. They were speaking American English, not foreign militia, U.S. Black Ops team. Target acquired. Phantom protocol confirmed. Notify oversight. The horrifying truth crashed over her. This was never rescue. This was elimination. Raven was bait. Someone in U.S. intelligence wanted her disappeared. Wraith, get to extraction. Charlie, I'll draw them off. She pushed Raven toward Ghost. Phantom negative. That's an order. Get him out. Whatever it takes. Their eyes met. Understanding passed without words. She was making the sacrifice play. Again, buying time with her life. Don't die, Raven whispered, not planning on it. She turned toward the enemy, raised her weapon, became the warrior she'd always been. Phantom rising one more time. The firefight lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of controlled bursts and tactical retreats. Drawing fire away. Buying time. 7 minutes of being exactly who she was trained to be. But as she fell back, Kira heard enemy comms. Ghost had patched their frequency. Alternate route blocked. They're heading to Charlie. These weren't militia. These were American operators, running illegal rendition. And they knew about the alternate extraction. Ghost, Wraith, they know about Charlie, changed to Poem. A helo sound cut through the night, but not from primary LZ, from the alternate point. A different voice on her radio. Female. Clear. Strong. Phantom, move your ass, Senior Chief. Shepard was flying extraction herself. Hope surged stronger than exhaustion. Kira changed direction, sprinting toward alternate LZ with everything left. Enemy tried to cut her off, too slow, too late, too committed to wrong position. She vaulted the wall, muscles screaming, across open ground, bullets kicking sand. The helicopter materialized, door guns laying suppressive fire, turning pursuit into suicide. Ghost's hand reached down. "Come on, Phantom." She grabbed his wrist, felt his strength haul her aboard. The helicopter banked hard, climbing into night, compound erupting in chaos below. Kira collapsed against the bulkhead, breathing hard, blood seeping from minor wounds, but alive. And beside her, Raven was alive too. "You're insane," Raven said, voice weak but tinged with wonder. Kira laughed, 4 years of grief releasing in pure, unexpected joy. "Welcome back, Raven. Welcome back yourself." He reached out. She took his hand, feeling life's warmth, proof that some promises could be kept. Shepard removed her helmet, revealing a face Kira recognized. But the recognition took a moment. The woman was older now, grayer, more scarred. Then it clicked. Commander Lydia Thorne, Kira's SEAL instructor from Buds, the woman who'd trained her from 2009 to 2011, who'd pushed her harder than anyone, made her into the operator she'd become. The voice on the phone, the modulated cadence that had seemed familiar. "LT on the challenge coin, Lydia Thorne." The pieces fell into place. The surveillance, the waiting, the careful orchestration of events. Lydia had been watching over her for 4 years, protecting her, waiting for the right moment. "You think I'd let them erase my best student?" Lydia's voice carried warmth beneath professional exterior. "The Black Ops team, rogue CIA faction, they've eliminated 7 inconvenient operators over 3 years. You were target 8. I've been tracking them, running counter-op. Ghost and Wraith are my team. This whole mission was designed to expose them." Wraith held up a recording device. "Got everything, video, audio, proof of illegal rendition. Goes to Senate Intelligence tomorrow." "They'll be dismantled," Lydia said. "You're safe now." As the helicopter carried them towards safety, Kira felt something she denied for 4 years. Peace. The past was behind her. The future uncertain. But in this moment, flying through darkness with the man she'd thought lost forever, she was exactly where she was meant to be. A warrior, a protector, a friend. The easy days were over, but they never had been the point. 6 months later, Fort Bragg looked different to Kira. Not the physical space, that was unchanged, but the way she moved through it, the way soldiers looked at her, the way she existed here. She was no longer invisible. The Thorne Doctrine Combat Leadership Academy held its opening ceremony on a crisp autumn morning. 32 students in the first class, hand-selected from all branches. Sloan Barrett was there, Wyatt Brennan, others who'd witnessed the confrontation and understood what real leadership looked like. Colonel Voss stood at the podium. Senior Chief Kira Thorne is the most decorated female SEAL in history, Navy Cross recipient, 3 Purple Hearts. She survived what would kill most operators twice over. She earned the right to teach through blood and sacrifice. It is my honor to introduce her as founding director of this academy. The applause was thunderous. Kira took the podium, looking out at eager faces. "I'm not here to teach you how to kill," she began, voice steady, clear. "I'm here to teach you when not to kill, when to hold back, when to protect, when to choose honor over easy victory." She paused, meeting eyes. "Real strength isn't what you can do to others. It's what you can do for them. 6 months ago, I could have hospitalized Staff Sergeant Kane. I chose restraint. That's the warrior you should become." In the back, Boone Mallory stood with arms crossed, proud smile on his weathered face. The administrative building had seen changes too. Captain Barrett had requested transfer to a logistics posting in Germany. A quiet acknowledgement that his judgment had failed when it mattered. Voss had approved it. Veronica Ashford had been forced into early retirement. No pension, no benefits. The investigation into her sabotage of personnel files had been thorough and unforgiving. She'd left the base in disgrace, escorted by MPs. Caleb Morrison had volunteered for deployment to a forward operating base in Poland, trying to prove perhaps to himself more than anyone that he could be more than the man who'd challenged a SEAL to a competition he had no hope of winning. Word through the grapevine said he was doing well, keeping his head down, learning humility the hard way. They were gone, but their absence served as a reminder that consequences were real and accountability mattered. After the ceremony, Voss found Kira in her office. He carried an envelope. From the detention facility, Declan Kane. Kira took it. The envelope was worn, as if it had been handled many times before being sent. He's written every week for 6 months, Voss said. Never asked for a response, just acknowledges what he did, takes responsibility. Kira looked at the envelope for a long moment. Then she opened it, read slowly. Senior Chief Thorne, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I see clearly now what I was too afraid to see before. You represented everything I pretended to be but wasn't. Every time I looked at you, I saw my own failure reflected back. So I tried to destroy you before you could expose what I really was. I'm 34 years old, 11 years since Afghanistan. 11 years since Sergeant Rodriguez died because I froze. I've been running from that truth my entire adult life, running by attacking anyone who reminded me of my inadequacy. I'm done running. I have 5 years in this cell to figure out who I want to be instead of who I've been pretending to be. There's no guarantee I'll succeed. Redemption isn't a right. It's earned through years of consistent action. But I'm trying every day, one day at a time. You showed me what real strength looks like. Not through violence, but through restraint. You could have broken me. Instead, you let the consequences of my own actions do what needed doing. Thank you for that, for showing me the difference between a warrior and a bully. I'm writing this not for you, but because I need to own the truth. Finally, completely. If I ever get the chance to prove I've changed, I'll take it. Until then, I'll keep working. Declan Kane. Kira set the letter down carefully. He's starting to understand, she said quietly. Whether he finishes the journey, that's up to him. Voss nodded. 5 years is a long time. People can change, or they can't. We'll see which one he is. That afternoon, Boone found Kira on the range. He pulled something from his pocket, the tactical compass he'd given her before the mission. You brought it back. Promised I would. Now pass it to someone worthy. Kira didn't hesitate. She turned and called out. Barrett. Sloan jogged over, eyes bright with eagerness to learn. Kira placed the compass in her hand. Master Sergeant Mallory carried this through Desert Storm. It brought him home from Kuwait. I carried it to Syria. It brought me home too. When you need to find your way home, this will guide you. Sloan's eyes filled with tears. I won't let you down, Senior Chief. I know you won't. That evening, Kira stood on the range with Boone and Raven, watching the sun set over Fort Bragg. Raven had recovered. 6 months of medical treatment and intensive physical therapy. He'd regained most of the weight. The haunted look in his eyes was fading, replaced by something that looked like hope. He was joining the instructor, Cadre Monday. Phantom and Raven, he said, teaching the next generation. We always said if we survived, we'd pay it forward. We survived, Kira replied. Not everyone did, Boone added quietly. Rodriguez, the others. But we honor them by doing this, by making sure their sacrifice meant something. Commander Lydia Thorne had returned to her shadowy work. The Senate investigation had been swift and brutal. 7 CIA operatives arrested, 2 fled to countries without extradition treaties. The entire black site network exposed, documented, and dismantled. Lydia had sent Kira a brief encrypted message last month. 8 operators saved, 12 still missing. Guardian protocol continues. Stay sharp, Phantom. LT. Ghost and Wraith had returned to their units, but Kira suspected she'd see them again. Operators like that didn't retire. They just moved to the next mission. Ghost had left a bottle of good scotch with a note, for the next impossible op. Call if you need us. 3 generations stood together on the range as the sun touched the horizon. Boone at 72, Kira at 34, Sloan at 24, the guard passing the torch. The easy days are over, Raven said. Their old phrase. They never were, Kira replied, but the real work, that's just beginning. Boone smiled. When I started in this army back in '73, an old sergeant told me something I didn't understand until years later. He said the measure of a warrior isn't how many enemies you defeat, it's how many warriors you create. He looked at Kira, at Raven, at Sloan. I think he'd be proud of what we're building here. As darkness fell, lights came on across the training complex. Soldiers preparing for tomorrow, for challenges ahead, for the mission that never ended. Somewhere in the world, operators needed protecting. Warriors needed guidance. The next generation needed teachers who understood that strength came not from violence, but from the choice to restrain it. And Kira Thorne, callsign Phantom, was exactly where she needed to be. In her office, the letter from Declan sat in a drawer. Not forgotten, just waiting. A record of one man's journey toward redemption. Whether he would complete that journey remained to be seen. But he had been given a chance, and sometimes a chance was all anyone needed. The Phantom Protocol continued. The Guardian program expanded. Legacy built not through destruction, but through creation. Home at last. The war would always be there, but so would the warriors, and so would the teachers who shaped them. That was enough.